Hey there, everyone. We're back today talking about more Jonah Hex. We've got Jonah Hex, Two Gun Mojo. Now, this is different from the other ones. It's different from the ongoing series, and different from the New 52 version. This is older. This is Vertigo Jonah Hex. So you know it's going to be a little different. So, Two Gun Mojo here. The basic idea is that Joe Lansdale wrote this story, and he had a memory of Jonah Hex being like kind of a badass cowboy that fought supernatural things. And when he's like, when he had the option to write Jonah Hex, he was like, yeah, I want to write Jonah Hex. I want to write about like cowboys fighting monsters. And when he was like, yeah, so I got into it, and I was like reading the old Jonah Hex comics to catch up on how it should be, what it should be like. And he's like, you know what? There was no supernatural stuff. I just imagined that. And like, it's funny because like my image of Jonah Hex is the same. So I've always had the image that Jonah Hex fought like supernatural things in the West. And it's not always like that. Even like the previous titles are not really like that. Just like every once in a while somebody shows up, like El Diablo shows up, and that's supernatural. You can't get away from that. But like, all these the other characters that are common with him are just like bounty hunters, or like, gentlemen gamblers and things. There's not a lot of like supernatural stuff or horror stuff, although there's horrific things. So like when Jonah Hex usually fights like not monsters, but like there'll be like like slaughters of Indians by soldiers and stuff, and it's like the battles are all, there'll be battles at night where it's like crazy, and there's like it's like a monster attack almost. But like I could see how you would imagine that. But Two Gun Mojo here, basically Joe Lansdale was like, okay, Jonah Hex didn't have supernatural stuff, but what if he did? So like, and that kind of has actually affected the way Jonah Hex is from this point onwards, because like in the later Jonah Hex stuff, there is supernatural stuff sometimes, not all the time, but occasionally. And so in this story, like it's a great start, because like it's starting here where like Jonah Hex is being dragged on a horse, he's about to be hanged, and he gets saved by another bounty hunters hunting for the same people. And they decide like, okay, we'll ride together. And they ride into this kind of weird town where like the first thing they find is like a dude selling pictures with corpses of criminals. And there's a lot of everybody seems to be like a kind of a little off. So this whole town is really weird in the sense that like, they're kind of ghouls at this, they like, people are lining up to get their pictures taken with corpses. There's lots of like dead bodies strung up in places. They've got like a barn with bodies in it that they're saving for display. And what happens is like, there's a they're at the bar, and one of the dudes is like, there's like a native bartender, and he's like, abusing her, and Jonah Hex is not having any of that. So he's like, beats them up and whatever. And, they kind of clear the situation out, and they, these two get a room together. And Jonah Hex throws the other guy out after he snores. So like what happens is the guy goes out to the barn to sleep because he doesn't have any other option. But like out in the barn is where they're saving those bodies. And what happens is like, there's some weird dudes in there, and they like start to try to, attack the old man. And he starts shooting people, and they won't die. He doesn't understand why. And he shoots him like a bunch of times, and then the guy shoots him back. And Jonah Hex hears the battle, comes down, And Jonah Hex is a much better shot, obviously, but like he also doesn't. He finds these kind of like weird, freakish people, and they're like kind of holding up the corpses to shoot. But actually, so he gets shot, like grazed in the head and knocked out. It's kind of weird. Circus freaks, and they take off. But Jonah Hex isn't dead. He wakes up. The other guy dies. They run off, and you've got like this kind of thing where like they get locked up because there's a bunch. Now there's like somebody's dead. There's been a lot of shooting. They blame Jonah Hex. They lock him up, and then you get to see like the real town, how the town is. So like the town is like really happy to hang people. They're like super excited. They're building a gallows. They're like putting up advertisements. They're like really excited. But so here you got like, see the hanging today at noon. It's like a big they have like children's choir singing for the hanging. And what happens is the native woman from earlier that Jonah Hex saved comes and murders the officer and just saves Jonah Hex because like she realizes that these people are not on the up and up. So Jonah Hex like escapes, but the native girl, she gets shot on the way out, and they escape, but so like here's another example. Like it's a really kind of good thing. There hasn't been a lot of interaction with the people in the town in this thing. You kind of get that there's a little something off, but after the hanging is canceled because Jonah Hex escapes, they're like, no, we are not having this. And it's we are having a hanging. And like even this old lady with a gun here and her fried chicken in her hand is like, you promised me a hanging, we're getting a hanging. And she's like hopping on a horse and she's like, let's get him. So like these people are like bloodthirsty ghouls. They're awful people, a whole town of them. But they're like trying to track down Jonah Hex, which is possibly the worst thing you could do, because Jonah Hex is a murder machine. So what happens is the girl dies while he tells her to ride on ahead. She's been shot, but he's like, you'll be okay, just ride up ahead. And she he finds her later and she's dead. So he kind of burns her body, and he goes back to the town because he's like, you know what, these people are not good, but I've got to find who killed this guy who was with me, and I got to get his body. So like they leave his body there basically, and he's like, I got to take the body because I got to bury it. So but he goes on the hunt for this kind of weird circus troupe, and they're we see them here, this kind of wizard looking fellow, and he's got his circus troupe, and he's got this huge fat lady, he's got this super tall man that's got a lot of tattoos, and this like pumpkin head dwarf, and they all like are super strong for some reason, and they're super agile. Even like here's the fat lady is like jumping through hoops, flaming hoops, and standing on one hand, and then like the tall skinny guy is like easily lifting up the huge lady over his head, like no trouble. Dwarf is juggling. It's gives you a good kind of overlook of how the characters are, like what you can understand that there's something weird about them. And you get this kind of thing because like the person who shot Jonah Hex is not in that group, it's somebody else. And you find that it's like zombie Wild Bill Hickok. That's so there is something supernatural in this. There is a weird zombie who's being kept alive through stuff this dude learned in Haiti, some zombie rituals, and he's giving them like their super strength by using this kind of so they're zombies. They can't feel any pain, and they can just like work at super strong powers but they're only working on his orders. They're kind of mindless. And they're like, Jonah Hex, you're our new zombie. We're gonna zombify you. And obviously, Jonah Hex like escapes from their zombifying activities, and they get run off. Jonah Hex escapes, and he's like nearly dead, but he gets saved, and he has to hunt them down because he wants hunt them down. But in kind of, this is like a classic Jonah Hex. It's like almost a trope where like he's hunting somebody and he'll be chasing after them and he'll run into something worse. So like, you know, he's running through and he's tracking them, and he runs into like all these people are trapped in this kind of bunker fighting off like an Indian attack. And what happens is like the troop that he's hunting is in the bunker. So he finds them and they're like, oh no, that's no good. But, you know, they realize they can't kill him because the troops are there, but also they need him to fight so they don't die from the Indians that are facing them. But like what happens is they kind of, you know, they escape and run off, and Jonah Hex chases them down. And in the same way, like this military guy goes off and he gets shot too in the same way. So like basically everybody who teams up with Jonah Hex dies in some horrible way, but like it's kind of also a trope for Jonah Hex is that like the people who are with him tend to not come to good ends. So Jonah Hex, like, you know, forces the horse to run and run and run until it dies. And eventually he's able to track down the troop. And what happens is they're out of food and they just kill the dwarf and they start eating him for food instead. But, you know, their fire from roast, though they killed the fat lady and the dwarf actually, but like, they, you know, they start a fire and it's so easy to track them that he just finds them immediately. And he, you know, they have this kind of, here's Wild Bill, who is like an undead zombie. So like even if you shoot him correctly, he's still going to be able to shoot. But also, you know, he's still basically a really good fighter. But like Jonah Hex basically outsmarts him. So like he's like, okay, he's faster than me, he's a better shot than me, but he's not smarter than me. So Jonah Hex basically draws and he ducks quickly. So like zombie like doesn't have the kind of ability to adjust that quickly. So Jonah Hex ends up shooting him in the eyes so he can't see, and stops the zombie, captures the wizard, shoots him in the knees and says, those Indians sure are going to be happy to find you. They're going to be happy to torture you for 2 or 3 days before you die. And off he goes, Jonah Hex. So this is, I think it's the first of the Vertigo Jonah Hex stories, Two Gun Mojo. It's pretty interesting. This is kind of Jonah Hex how I remember Jonah Hex. So when I read this, I think like this is how I imagine Jonah Hex always was. And I think like Joe I just have that same kind of memory as like Joe Lansdale, because I've read Jonah Hex before this, and I would have always said that there were some kind of supernatural things in Jonah Hex, but Joe Lansdale in the introduction to this is saying like, no, there really wasn't. So I don't know, it just seems like it fits to me. And this is like really the kind of perfect look at that. There are a few more of these. Again, like it's hard for me to find these things. If I find more Vertigo Jonah Hex, I'll definitely buy it. I would suggest you guys, you know, hunt down this book too if you're interested in looking at it. If you find the other ones, that'd be cool too. Let me know how they are, because I haven't read those. But yeah, so that's Jonah Hex. We have not a whole lot more Jonah Hex to talk about though. If I find more though, I'll definitely be talking about it. But it's slim pickings. So yeah, I will talk to you guys next time.